Yesterday we saw some pretty vivid images of wild horses running through the city of London. In fact, it was trained horses running wild through the city of London. They were household cavalry horses, black, white, blooded, scared by the sound of construction material falling from a building. Lots of people have had things to say about the prophetic meaning of that, and they definitely feel weighty. But I want to share with you today what came to me as soon as I saw that image. It was Proverbs 29 verse 18. Where there is no vision, my people perish, it says in one translation. But my version that I read in the English Standard Version, the ESV, says, where there is no redemptive revelation, my people cast off restraint. What's that got to do with horses, you might be thinking? But there's a really clear parallel between this lack of vision, casting off restraint, running wild. And in fact, I've heard some preachers say that in the Spanish translation, it says cast off restraint means run wild like horses. And that was the picture that I saw when these horses were running wild through London. It spoke to me less of the horsemen of the apocalypse and more of lack of governance because of lack of vision. The footnote in the Passion Version talks about the Hebrew word meaning vision of the night, dream, oracle, revelation. And the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament that was kept in libraries like the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, contemporary to the Old Testament and later, says where there was no prophetic seer. So where the role of the prophetic, where the role of redemptive revelation is missing, then people cast off restraint. What does cast off restraint mean? Again, in the Septuagint, it says that people become lawless, and that is exactly what the word anarchy means. Really, anarchy means without ruler and without a king. Another understanding of what the Hebrew meant in that proverb is let loose, stripped, or made naked. What I believe this passage is saying to us in light of those events yesterday is that we are being led by those without redemptive revelation. Prophetic words are plentiful, but redemptive revelation is rare. The lack of restraint is directly related to the lack of true leadership. If you don't honour God, you can't really lead. If he's not your king, how can you have a ruler? Indeed, as I just saying, that's where anarchy comes from. That's where I think we're being warned we're headed to if we can't acknowledge God as king. And I don't mean saying something nice in a Christmas message. I don't mean sending out Christmas cards or playing the cozying up to the Christian church game. I mean, where in our government are we actually submitted to God? The responsibility for this shift belongs to the church even more than the state. You see, we are here on earth as God's legislative body to pray and proclaim and to prophesy what God says in his word. If we don't live and model that, how can we expect everyone else to? The second passage that springs to mind is a parallel to what's going on in Proverbs 29 that I was just talking about a moment ago. Hosea 6 verse 8 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And it is not just mental knowledge, understanding even. It's the application of revelation. In this particular case, in Hosea, it's talking about the priestly mandate that is within the people of Israel and now has been given to everyone who calls themselves a believer in Jesus Christ. here in this passage, they forget who the Father is. They forget their relationship with God, both individually and corporately. And then the consequence, the judgment on that is that the priesthood of God's children is forgotten. So God's children forget their Father. The Father forgets the priestly mandate of the children. Why am I bringing that up? Because I think these 2 points are paired. And secondly, because of a revelation I got in Nehemiah 1 just the other day. In Nehemiah 1, it talks about how Nehemiah approaches king, getting ready to approach the king. The king at that time was Artaxerxes. He was the son of Ahasuerus. In case you don't know your Babylonian kings, what's going on there is Ahasuerus was the king in the time of Esther. Artaxerxes is his son, and Nehemiah had this role, this responsible role in the court of Artaxerxes, which was the cupbearer. His job was to taste the wine that was going to the king. And this is really remarkable to me because apart from the fact that this is a really responsible role, it is set in the context of the death of the king of the time of Esther, who, according to historians, was actually killed by one of his courtiers. Why am I saying all of this? Because if you follow through history, what you see is that if Esther was silent, deliverance would have come from another. But she was called for such a time as this. And had she have not been called, where would the role of the cupbearer, where would Nehemiah's entrance have come? Where would the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, where would the revival that comes in the time of Ezra have come from? So we have 2 generations there. We have Esther, who speaks as a voice to the voiceless, who brings deliverance because she's willing to stand up and speak even at the potential cost of her own life, so deliverance may come to a generation. Subsequently, we have a Nehemiah generation who rebuild the walls and are the precursor to revival in their land because their passion for seeing God's people restored. One doesn't come without the other, but they all begin with knowing who our God is and then honouring him as king by being willing to stand up and be counted with our words in our times. And that takes us full circle back to Proverbs and this picture of wild horses casting off their restraints. Our role at such a time as this is to be bold, to be strong, and to speak up as his, because without that prophetic vision, there will be anarchy. There will be a lack of restraint. But also, it's a time to discern the difference between abundance of prophetic words and redemptive revelation.